Hi, I am Rosetta Ross. I teach religious studies at Spelman College, a historically Black women's institution in Atlanta. I practice there a pedagogy of teaching and creating dissonance, particularly in relation to the nature of American Christianities and use of the concept religion. My scholarship explores the meaning of legacies of religious consciousness and Black women's activism, particularly in the civil rights movement, and varied meanings of religions and spiritualities in the lives of Africana women. And in relation to this latter area, I have organized conferences for conversations and was a founder of the Journal of Black Women and Religious Cultures to further those conversations. I am delighted to be invited to respond. I want to begin by thanking again Dr. Wimbush for the invitation to respond and for this wonderful and complex exhibit and lecture that offer many possibilities for entry and engagement. My remarks focus on the latter part of Dr. Wimbush's lecture, and especially the clause near the beginning of his summary of stage 5, there remains only struggle, that follows his statement of supercharged scripturalization that cannot be unread. In centering my response on this clause, I argue that activism, particularly Black women's activism, is an expressive form of recognition that salvation requires the constancy of struggle within or in the face of masquerade. Within my response, I offer an interpretation of being saved or conversion as the experience that precipitates constant struggle, distinguishing this understanding from conversion from attempts of the quote, Black fleshed person to be saved within/into white men's world, end quote. My interpretation hinges on uncoupling salvation for Black persons from Christianity. The late Charles Long construes the origin of religion as a moment and movement that emerges from an encounter with the sacred. According to Long, encountering the sacred occurs when a new form of reality breaks into human consciousness by conveying an experience of power, ultimacy, and obligation. Perception of the new form compels the one or ones who recognize it to communicate the experience as well as to pursue creation of another qualitatively different cultural order. Recognition of the sacred occurs as an inner experience within the space where persons engage consciousness, emotions, self reflection, and more. The interior realm cradles the grounding of individual moral life. It is the seat of personal sovereignty. This is not to say that one's interiority and morality are unrelated to the social world. However, the inner life is not entirely determined by society, since interiority is, in fact, a defense against being dominated by discourses and norms of the social order. Through inner experience, a person may create and perceive new ideas. Interiority is, in addition, the space where persons recognize incongruity between self understanding and the way they appear or are viewed by society. Because the interior life is sovereign, persons may choose the extent to which they perceive or ruminate upon inner experience, or conversely, may elect not to attend to interiority at all. Religious historian Sidney E. Mead characterizes Christianity in America in this latter way, writing, quote, Americans have so presented to view and celebrated the external and material side of their pilgrim's progress that they have tended to conceal, even from themselves, the inner spiritual pilgrimage with its more subtle dimensions and profound depths. I view Mead's assertion of secreting the inner world from the self as one practice that sustains masquerade in North America. The custom, this custom neutralizes full experience of the emotional realm of self-reflection, regret, remorse, shame, guilt, empathy, and sorrow, insofar as these emotions relate to and constitute the moral life. At the same time, and through the practice of neutralization, concealing inner experience obscures and hides realities and testimonies of the world of hurt that masquerade requires. In the United States, encountering the sacred is recognition of a reality that supersedes gross irrationality in the discourses and structures that sustain injustice. I'm not saying this is limited to the United States, but it's the context that I feel most familiar with talking about. That's why I'm focused on the United States. For Black persons in the US, this involves an unveiling of the normative cultural dispositions that sustain anti Black racism and white supremacy. I interpret African American experience of the sacred as always also including a critical return through Black history from a standpoint of the experience of radical otherness. This moment creates space for critical thinking. Black experience of the sacred facilitates acknowledging historical experience and recognizing sources that institute and perpetuate anti Blackness, or as Professor Wimbush writes, persons become capable of, quote, seeing more clearly how reality is masqueraded, end quote. This is salvation and conversion. For African Americans, it is to be grasped by the power and ultimacy of radical Black subjectivity as the point of view from which one is oriented toward the world. The manifestation of this for a single agent is a synecdoche of the larger ongoing constant struggle. In 1989, historian Darlene Clark Hine defined the culture of dissemblance as an inner disposition through which Black women create psychic space to strategize for taking action in behalf of themselves. Hine writes, and I quote her at length, because of the interplay of racial animosity, class tensions, gender role differentiation, and regional economic variations, Black women, as a rule, develop a cult of secrecy, a culture of dissemblance to protect the sanctity of inner aspects of their lives. The dynamics of dissemblance involved creating the appearance of disclosure or openness about themselves and their feelings, while actually remaining an enigma. Only with secrecy, thus achieving a self imposed invisibility, could ordinary Black women accrue the psychic space and harness the resources needed to hold their own in the often one sided, mismatched resistance struggle. End quote. Through the culture of dissemblance, Black women create alternative self images and shield from scrutiny the private, empowering definitions of themselves. These resources fuel persistence in improving themselves and their communities and seeking to change society. The example of Ruby Hurley. In 1951, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People assigned Ruby Hurley to organize and lead its Southeast region. Although local chapters and a few state conferences existed in the South, before 1951, the NAACP refrained from establishing a nationally funded outpost in what some described as enemy territory. When 42-year-old Hurley moved to Birmingham from New York, she already had begun carefully cultivating a proper, respectable Protestant church woman image. Hurley did so primarily by maintaining relationship with congregations of the majority white Methodist Episcopal Church, from her childhood congregation Asbury in Washington, D.C., to St. Mark's in Harlem, to St. Paul in Birmingham, and finally to Warren Memorial in Atlanta. Hurley's active participation in and beyond these congregations provided access to white Christians as she navigated the treacherous waters of Deep South civil rights work. After the 1954 Brown decision, for example, Hurley's Methodist churchwoman identity allowed her to engage parachurch organizations such as human relations councils and concerned citizen groups of so-called moderate white Christians. Her conscious use of the respectable churchwoman identity to gain access to white and Black communities in regional NAACP work was a practice of dissemblance. Through this identity, Hurley protected a self-definition which enabled her strategizing to order, lead, and expand Southern NAACP work, including negotiating and interpreting the association's activity in the face of intense fears, violence, and repression. I am arguing that one element of Black women's activism included and includes masking, whereas dissemblance is a form that provides space for the work of unveiling masquerade. Persons such as Hurley, sometimes triply masked, working within while breaking apart the logics and methods of scripturalization. Masquerade requires everyone to participate in masking, but it does not and cannot compel meanings or functions of the mask. On a significant level, masquerade is not a fixed reality. Salvation is perception of this not fixed reality and living within masquerade while recognizing the imperative that what remains is constant struggle.